The village of Zambara was known for its lush green fields, flowing rivers, and the warmth of its people. It was a place where traditions were honored and beauty was seen as a gift from the gods. In this village, a girl named Ifeoma was born to Chief Okon and his beloved wife, Mama Nala. From the moment she came into the world, the villagers whispered about her extraordinary beauty. Her skin glowed like the morning sun, her eyes sparkled with kindness, and her long, thick black hair shimmered in the light. People believed that Ifeoma was specially blessed by the gods, and many called her the daughter of the moon. Chief Okon and Mama Nala adored their daughter, raising her with love and kindness. Ifeoma was not only beautiful, but also gentle and humble. She treated everyone with respect, from the elders to the youngest children in the village. But happiness is not always meant to last forever. One fateful evening, tragedy struck. Mama Nala fell gravely ill, and despite the best efforts of the village healers, she passed away. The village mourned, but no one grieved more than Ifeoma and her father. Mama Nala had been the heart of their home, and without her, everything felt empty. Chief Okon, a strong and respected man, struggled to care for his young daughter alone. He believed that Ifeoma needed a mother's love and guidance, so after some time, he decided to remarry. The woman he chose was Urema, a widow from a neighboring village. She was beautiful on the outside, but carried a heart filled with envy and bitterness. At first, she pretended to be kind, smiling warmly at Ifeoma and speaking sweetly to Chief Okon. But deep inside, Urema could not stand Ifeoma's beauty and the love everyone had for her. She had a daughter of her own, Zubeidi, but unlike Ifeoma, Zubeidi was plain-looking and often overlooked by the villagers. As time passed, Urema's jealousy grew stronger. Whenever villagers praised Ifeoma, calling her the daughter of the moon, Urema's anger burned inside her. She wished her own daughter could receive the same admiration, but no matter how much she tried, Zubeidi was always in Ifeoma's shadow. Urema knew she had to do something. Ifeoma's beauty, especially her long, flowing hair, was a constant reminder of everything her own daughter lacked, and so, hidden behind her forced smiles, she began plotting a way to take away the one thing that made Ifeoma stand out. At first, Urema acted like a loving and caring mother. She spoke sweetly to Ifeoma, helped her with chores, and even braided her long, shiny hair. To everyone in the village, it seemed like Urema had accepted Ifeoma as her own daughter. But deep inside, Urema's heart was filled with jealousy. Every time she looked at Ifeoma, she saw a girl who was more beautiful than her own daughter, Zubeidi. No matter how much she tried to ignore it, the truth was clear. Zubeidi was plain-looking, while Ifeoma shined like a star. Urema could not understand why the villagers always spoke about Ifeoma's beauty. Everywhere she went, she heard people saying, "Ah, Ifeoma is truly the daughter of the moon. Her hair flows like the river, and her face is as bright as the morning sun." It made her furious. She wanted people to admire Zubeidi instead, but no one ever did. Even when she dressed her daughter in fine clothes or braided her hair in fancy styles, people barely noticed her. At night, Urema lay awake, her mind filled with anger. Why did Ifeoma have to be so special? Why did people love her more than Zubeidi? It was not fair. The more she thought about it, the more she hated Ifeoma. She started looking at her with cold eyes, speaking to her in a sharp voice, and making her do all the hard work in the house. Ifeoma did not understand why her stepmother was suddenly so unkind, but she never complained. She continued to smile, to be kind, and to do her chores without question. This only made Urema angrier. It was not enough for Ifeoma to suffer. She wanted to take away the very thing that made her special. Late at night, when the moon cast a soft glow over the village, Ifeoma lay peacefully asleep in her small room. Her long, thick hair spread across the mat like a river of silk, untouched and beautiful. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, but inside the house, something far more sinister was stirring. Urema stood at the doorway, gripping a sharp knife in her hand. Her eyes burned with jealousy, her heart pounding with excitement. This was the moment she had been waiting for. If she could not make her own daughter as beautiful as Ifeoma, then she would destroy Ifeoma's beauty instead. Slowly, Urema crept toward the sleeping girl, making sure not to wake her. She knelt beside her and grabbed a handful of Ifeoma's hair, feeling its softness between her fingers. A wicked smile spread across her face. Without hesitation, she raised the knife and began cutting. Thick strands of hair fell to the ground, one after another. She worked quickly, slicing away the long, beautiful locks until nothing but uneven, jagged patches remained. As the last strands slipped through her fingers, Urema let out a quiet, triumphant laugh. Ifeoma was no longer the daughter of the moon. Now she looked like an ordinary, pitiful girl. The next morning, as the sun rose over the village, Ifeoma woke to a horrible feeling. Something was wrong. She reached up, touching her head, and let out a gasp. Her hair, her beautiful hair, was gone. Panic filled her chest as she scrambled to her feet, running outside. The villagers gathered around in shock, whispering among themselves. Then came the cruel voice of Urema, loud and filled with mockery. "Look at her!" Urema sneered, pointing at Ifeoma. "She was once the daughter of the moon, but now she looks like a cursed child. No man will ever want to marry her." Laughter erupted from Urema and a few heartless villagers, while others gasped in horror at the stepmother's cruelty. Ifeoma's heart shattered into pieces. She felt exposed, humiliated, and powerless. Tears streamed down her face as she turned and ran, away from the house, away from the village, away from everything she had ever known. The only thing she could think of was escaping the shame. She ran deep into the forest, not knowing where she was going, only that she could never return. Ifeoma ran as fast as her legs could carry her, blinded by tears, her heart heavy with sorrow. The laughter of the villagers still echoed in her ears, and the cruel words of her stepmother cut deeper than any knife. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she had to get away. The trees of the great forest stood tall around her, their branches swaying gently in the night breeze. But Ifeoma paid no attention. She ran until her feet ached, until her breath came in ragged gasps, until her legs could carry her no more. Finally, she collapsed near the banks of a quiet stream, her body trembling with exhaustion. The cold night air wrapped around her, but she did not care. She curled into a ball, sobbing uncontrollably. How could this have happened? Everything she had ever known was gone. Her mother was dead. Her father had turned a blind eye. And now, the one thing that made her special, her beautiful hair, had been taken from her in the cruelest way. The sound of rustling leaves broke through her cries. Ifeoma looked up, startled, as a shadow moved toward her. Fear gripped her heart, but before she could react, a soft, gentle voice spoke. "Child, why do you weep so bitterly?" Ifeoma turned to see an old woman standing before her. Her face was lined with age, but her eyes held a warmth that soothed Ifeoma's aching heart. She wore a flowing robe, and her silver-grey hair was wrapped in a beautiful scarf. There was something mystical about her, something that made Ifeoma feel safe. "My life is over," Ifeoma whispered, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. "I have lost everything." The old woman knelt beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "No, my child," she said, with a knowing smile. "Your journey has only just begun." The woman introduced herself as Mama Efia, a healer who lived in the sacred caves of Osun, a place where lost souls found their true purpose. She helped Ifeoma to her feet and led her through the dense forest. Though Ifeoma was weak and tired, she felt a strange sense of peace in the woman's presence. When they finally arrived at the caves, Ifeoma gasped in awe. The place was unlike anything she had ever seen. A waterfall cascaded down smooth rocks, glistening under the moonlight. Flowers of every color bloomed around the entrance, their fragrance filling the air. Inside the cave, glowing stones lined the walls, casting a warm golden light. It felt magical, sacred. Mama Efia gave Ifeoma food and water, then wrapped her in a soft cloth, letting her rest. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ifeoma felt safe. That night, she slept peacefully, not knowing that her life was about to change forever. In the days that followed, Mama Efia became the mother Ifeoma had lost. She comforted her, wiped away her tears, and taught her that true beauty came not from the outside, but from within. Ifeoma listened carefully, eager to learn. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of her journey toward her true destiny. As the days turned into weeks, Ifeoma stayed with Mama Efia in the sacred caves of Osun. Each morning, she woke up to the sound of birds singing and the gentle rush of the waterfall. She spent her days helping Mama Efia gather herbs, prepare healing potions, and care for the wounded travelers who came seeking the old woman's wisdom. Slowly, her sadness began to fade. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Mama Efia looked at Ifeoma with kind but serious eyes. "There is something you must know, my child," she said. "The gods have not abandoned you. They have blessed you in ways you cannot yet see." Ifeoma frowned. "Blessed me?" she asked, touching her short, uneven hair. "How can that be? My beauty is gone. My stepmother made sure of that." Mama Efia smiled and shook her head. "Foolish girl," she said gently. "Beauty is not in your hair. It is in your heart, in your spirit. in the kindness you show to others. Your true power has always been inside you. She reached into a small wooden box and pulled out a golden comb. It shimmered in the firelight, its delicate teeth carved with ancient symbols. Mama Efia placed it in Ifeoma's hands and said, "This comb holds great power. When the time is right, use it, and you will understand your true strength." Ifeoma stared at the comb, confused but hopeful. She did not know what it meant, but she trusted Mama Efia. She tucked it away safely, promising to wait for the right moment. As the years passed, Ifeoma grew into a wise and confident young woman. She learned the art of healing, mixing herbs to cure sickness. She learned to read the stars, to listen to the whispers of the wind, and to understand the wisdom of the ancestors. Mama Efia taught her not just how to survive, but how to lead, how to stand tall even when the world tried to break her. No longer was Ifeoma the frightened girl who had run from her village in shame. She'd become something more, something stronger. Though she did not yet know what the future held, she felt deep in her heart that her journey was far from over. The golden comb remained tucked away, waiting for the day when its true power would be revealed. In the grand palace of Zambara, King Emeka sat deep in thought. He was a strong and just ruler, loved by his people. But there was one thing missing: a queen to stand beside him. One night, he had a strange and powerful dream. In his vision, he saw a woman standing in a field of golden light. Though he could not see her face clearly, he knew she was destined to be his wife. When he woke up, the feeling remained strong in his heart. This was no ordinary dream. It was a message from the gods. The next morning, King Emeka made a royal announcement. He declared that a grand selection would be held, where all the young women of the kingdom would present themselves at the palace. But there was one condition. He would not choose a queen based on riches or noble birth. He would only marry the woman who matched the vision he had seen. News of the king's search spread quickly, reaching every corner of Zambara. Families prepared their daughters, dressing them in the finest clothes and adorning them with gold and jewels, hoping to impress the king. But no one was more desperate than Urema. She saw this as the perfect chance to make her daughter, Zubeidi, the queen. "This is our opportunity," Urema whispered to Zubeidi, her eyes gleaming with ambition. "If you become queen, we will have power, wealth, and respect. No one will dare look down on us again." Zubeidi was doubtful. "But mother," she said, "what if I am not the woman in the king's vision?" Urema waved away her concerns. "The king is just a man. We will make sure he believes you are the woman he saw." Determined to succeed, Urema began plotting. She gathered the most skilled tailors to make Zubeidi the most dazzling gown. She instructed the best storytellers to spread rumors about Zubeidi's beauty and grace, and she visited the palace with gifts for the royal advisors, hoping to win their favor. But no matter how much she tried, there was one thing she could not change. Zubeidi was not the woman of golden light from the king's vision. And no matter how much gold she wore, she could never shine the way Ifeoma would. The day of the grand selection arrived, and the entire kingdom of Zambara buzzed with excitement. The palace gates were opened wide, and families from every village arrived, hoping their daughters would be chosen as the queen. The grand hall was decorated with golden drapes and fresh flowers, and a long carpet of royal red stretched from the entrance to the king's throne. Musicians played soft melodies, and servants carried trays of sweet fruits and spiced drinks for the guests. King Emeka sat on his golden throne, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd. Though many beautiful women stood before him, none of them gave off the golden glow he had seen in his vision. His heart remained unmoved. Meanwhile, Urema worked tirelessly to ensure that Zubeidi appeared as the most dazzling woman in the room. She dressed her daughter in an expensive gown embroidered with gold threads and adorned her with heavy jewelry. She even paid the best perfume makers to create a scent that would make Zubeidi unforgettable. "Stand tall, my daughter," Urema whispered as she fixed Zubeidi's veil. "You must walk with grace, smile with confidence, and speak only when necessary. The king must believe you are the woman from his dream." Zubeidi nodded, trying to push away her nervousness. She had always known she was not the most beautiful woman in the kingdom, but today, she had to believe she was. One by one, the young women stepped forward, introducing themselves to the king. Some spoke of their noble families, others of their talents in music or poetry. But King Emeka remained unimpressed. His vision had been clear. He was looking for a woman with a glow, a woman who carried a power greater than beauty alone. Finally, it was Zubeidi's turn. She walked up to the king, her gown shimmering under the light. She bowed deeply, and smiled as sweetly as she could. Urema watched from the crowd, holding her breath, but King Emeka barely glanced at her. There was no light, no warmth, no sign that she was the one. He shook his head, signaling his rejection. Zubeidi stepped back, her confidence crumbling, and Urema clenched her fists in frustration. One after another, the rest of the women were presented, but none of them matched the vision. Whispers spread through the crowd. The royal advisors exchanged nervous glances. The selection was supposed to be a day of celebration, but it was turning into a disappointment. The king sighed. "Is there no one else?" he asked. "Have I traveled this far, only to find that my queen does not exist?" The people lowered their heads in sadness. Perhaps the gods had not sent a queen after all. Just as the king was about to stand and end the ceremony, a sudden hush fell over the room. The air shifted. A figure dressed in a simple golden cloak stepped into the hall. All eyes turned toward the entrance, and gasps filled the air. A woman stood there, tall and graceful, her face partially hidden by the hood of her cloak. But even before she spoke, something about her presence felt different. The air around her seemed to shimmer. The king's heart pounded in his chest. The woman from his vision had arrived. Just as the king was about to stand and announce that the ceremony was over, a strange silence fell over the grand hall. The murmurs of the crowd faded, and all eyes turned toward the entrance. A lone figure stood at the palace doors, dressed in a flowing golden cloak. Though her face was hidden beneath the hood, there was something powerful about her presence, something almost otherworldly. Slowly, the woman stepped forward, her every movement filled with grace and confidence. The golden fabric of her cloak shimmered under the light, and the air around her seemed to glow. The villagers whispered among themselves, wondering who she was. Even Urema, who had been watching with frustration, felt a chill run down her spine. As she reached the center of the hall, the woman finally lowered her hood. Gasps filled the room. It was Ifeoma, but she was no longer the broken girl who had fled the village in shame. She stood tall, her eyes filled with wisdom and strength. The years spent with Mama Efia had changed her. She was no longer just beautiful. She was powerful. She was radiant. King Emeka's heart pounded. This was the woman from his vision. The glow he had seen in his dreams surrounded her, though he still did not understand how. Without saying a word, Ifeoma reached into the folds of her cloak and pulled out a golden comb, the very one Mama Efia had given her years ago. Holding it gently, she lifted it to her short, uneven hair. As she ran the comb through it, something incredible happened. A golden light surrounded her, swirling like a warm breeze. Before everyone's eyes, her hair began to grow, longer and longer, thicker and shinier than before. The rich black strands cascaded down her back, glowing under the palace lights. It was as though the gods themselves had blessed her in that very moment. The villagers gasped in wonder. Urema's eyes widened in shock. Zubeidi clutched her mother's arm, trembling with disbelief. King Emeka rose to his feet. There was no doubt left in his mind. The woman before him was the queen he had been searching for. The moment Ifeoma's hair flowed down her back like a river of silk, the entire hall fell silent. The golden glow around her shimmered softly, as if the gods themselves had blessed her presence. King Emeka stared at her in awe. There was no doubt in his heart. She was the woman from his vision. She was the queen he had been searching for. With steady steps, the king walked toward her and extended his hand. "You are the one," he said firmly. "The gods have chosen you, and so have I. Will you be my queen?" The villagers erupted in cheers, their voices echoing through the palace. Everyone had heard of Ifeoma's story, the girl whose beauty had once been stolen out of jealousy, now standing before them, more powerful than ever. But not everyone was celebrating. A sharp, horrified scream cut through the joyous noise. Urema clutched her chest as if she had been struck. "No! This cannot be!" she shrieked, her face twisted in disbelief and rage. "This wretched girl! She was nothing. I destroyed her. How can she stand here like this?" She turned desperately to King Emeka. "My king, you have been tricked. This is all an illusion. My daughter Zubeidi, she is the one worthy of being your queen." But Zubeidi, pale and trembling, had already fallen to her knees, her face filled with shame. She knew it was over. There was no denying the truth anymore. The king's eyes darkened as he turned to Urema. "You dared to harm an innocent girl, a girl destined for greatness," he said coldly. "You let your greed and jealousy blind you, and now you must face the consequences." He raised his hand, and the royal guards stepped forward. "Urema and her daughter Zubeidi are to be exiled from this kingdom," he declared. "They will never set foot in Zambara again." The villagers, who had long suffered under Urema's cruelty, erupted into cheers once more. Justice had been served. Urema screamed and fought as the guards grabbed her arms. "No, you cannot do this to me. I am the wife of Chief Okon. I am." But her words were drowned out by the villagers' joyful voices. They clapped and sang, celebrating Ifeoma's victory. As Urema and Zubeidi were dragged away, Ifeoma took a deep breath. She had suffered, but she had survived. And now she was stepping into her destiny, not as a broken girl, but as the future Queen of Zambara. The day of Ifeoma's coronation was the grandest celebration the kingdom of Zambara had ever seen. From the smallest villages to the heart of the royal city, people gathered in joy. The palace was decorated with the finest gold and silk, and the air was filled with the sweet aroma of fresh flowers. Musicians played lively tunes, and dancers moved gracefully, their colourful garments flowing like waves. Ifeoma, dressed in a regal gown of deep blue and gold, walked toward the grand throne. Her once short hair now cascaded down her back, shining like the night sky. But more than her beauty, it was her presence that captured the hearts of the people. She stood tall, radiating confidence and wisdom. King Emeka, standing beside her, smiled with pride as he lifted the royal crown. With a steady hand, he placed it upon her head, and a great cheer erupted from the crowd. "Long live Queen Ifeoma!" they chanted. The sound echoed across the land, reaching even the farthest villages. But Ifeoma knew that being queen was not just about wearing a crown. She had learned from her struggles, and she was determined to use her power for good. With kindness and wisdom, she made changes in the kingdom. No longer would women and girls be valued only for their beauty. They would be respected for their intelligence, their strength, and their courage. She encouraged education for all, ensuring that young girls could learn skills and knowledge to shape their own futures. She worked with the elders to bring fairness to the kingdom, making sure that justice was served, not based on wealth or power, but on truth and righteousness. Under Queen Ifeoma's rule, the people of Zambara flourished. Crops grew in abundance, trade prospered, and peace spread across the land. The people loved their queen, not just because she was beautiful, but because she was wise, strong, and just. And so, Ifeoma's story became more than just a tale of hardship and victory. It became a legend, one that would be told for generations. A story that proved true power came not from appearance, but from the heart. Urema and Zubeidi, once filled with pride and arrogance, now wandered the land in misery. Stripped of their wealth and status, they became beggars, moving from village to village in search of food and shelter. Gone were the fine clothes, the servants, and the respect they once commanded. Now, they wore tattered rags, their faces thin from hunger, their bodies weak from endless walking. Everywhere they went, people recognized them. "Is that not Urema, the woman who mistreated Ifeoma?" some whispered. "She was once powerful, but look at her now," others said. No one welcomed them. No one offered them kindness. The same cruelty Urema had once shown to Ifeoma, and others had now come back to her. One fateful day, weak and exhausted, Urema found herself standing before the grand palace gates of Zambara. She could smell the delicious aroma of food from inside, and her empty stomach ached. Desperation clouded her thoughts as she stepped forward. "Please," she begged the palace guards, her voice hoarse, "have mercy on an old woman. Just a little food, a little water." The guards recognized her instantly. "You dare to come here," one of them scoffed. "After all you did to Queen Ifeoma? Leave at once." Urema fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Please," she whispered, "I have nothing left." Word of her arrival reached Queen Ifeoma, who was seated in the palace hall. Instead of turning her away, she ordered the guards to bring Urema before her. When Urema entered, she barely recognized the young woman sitting on the throne. Ifeoma was more radiant than ever, dressed in royal robes, her hair long and shining like a crown of its own. But it was not just her appearance that made her powerful. It was the strength in her eyes, the wisdom in her expression. For a long moment, Ifeoma said nothing, simply looking at the woman who had once been her greatest tormentor. Finally, she spoke. "You came here seeking kindness," she said calmly. "The same kindness you refused to show me." Urema trembled. "I was wrong," she admitted. "I let jealousy consume me, and now I have nothing." Ifeoma's gaze softened, but only slightly. "I will not let you starve," she said. "You will be given food and water for today." Relief flooded Urema's face, but before she could speak, Ifeoma's voice hardened. But remember this. This is the last kindness you will ever receive from me. Urema lowered her head in shame. She knew that no amount of begging could undo the past. Ifeoma had shown her mercy, but she would never again have the power she once craved. And with that, she took the food she was given and disappeared into the world, forever carrying the weight of her mistakes. As the years passed, the story of Queen Ifeoma spread far beyond the borders of Zambara. It was told in the marketplaces, whispered around village fires, and sung by storytellers who travelled from town to town. Her name became more than that of a queen. It became a symbol of resilience, wisdom, and justice. People did not remember her only for her beauty, though it was said that her hair shone like the night sky, and her presence was as radiant as the sun. What truly made her unforgettable was her strength, the way she overcame hardship without losing her kindness, and how she ruled with fairness in her heart. Parents told their children about the girl who was mistreated, humiliated, and cast away, yet rose to become the most powerful woman in the land. Young girls looked up to her, not for her appearance, but for her courage and intelligence. Boys were taught that true power was not in wealth or force, but in character and wisdom. The tale of Ifeoma also carried a warning. It reminded people that jealousy and cruelty would always lead to downfall, just as it had for Urema and Zubeidi. Those who sought to harm others out of envy would find themselves lost, while those who remained pure of heart would be rewarded in ways they never imagined. And so, even long after Queen Ifeoma's reign, her name lived on. Her story was woven into the very spirit of Zambara, a tale that would never be forgotten, a lesson passed down through generations, a reminder that true greatness comes not from what is seen on the outside, but from the strength, wisdom, and kindness within.